Hey everybody, I am sorry we're starting so late, but there were technical and people difficulties. My name is Corbo Colladog. I've been doing Weird Panels about demons for about 2 years now. I don't know why they let me do this. I'm very thankful for it. Just a note, at the end of April in Boston, the Satanic Temple is having SatanCon, and I'm going to be speaking there, and it's going to be basically this presentation, but with some cleanup. So afterwards, I'd be very thankful for feedback. That would mean a lot to me. Am I audible? Rock on Chicago. Okay. So I have a podcast. It's called The Dispatches. It is a podcast about hell. Not that you're going there, but we think it's a fun topic. We're trying to kind of denature it a little bit. Me and 2 other co-hosts. If you are interested in more material from this presentation and other presentations, I've got a subpage on there called The Writer's Guide to Demons, which dispatch.ist.wgd is the landing site for that. So you can leave now if you want to. I slowly update this site as time allows. So fair warning, this is an After Dark panel and there will be penises. At least 2. So I don't mind questions. I love questions. I love arguments. But for the most part, if you want clarification or for me to repeat something or slow down and stop fucking mumbling, raise your hand and say something or throw something at me. If you want to add to my store of knowledge or radically change my topic, wait until I ask for questions, please. I don't have that much time to do this. Would someone give me a warning at 10 minutes to 11? I would be appreciating that very much. So would the next people. We're going to be going so fast. We're not talking about real demons, demon worship, demon summoning, that sort of thing, ghost hunting, etc. I can talk about that stuff. It's not my first choice, but I'm happy to have conversations about that afterwards, point people towards good resources, that sort of thing. Some of the stuff is still practiced in the modern day under different interpretations and versions and things like that. One challenge we've dealt with in our podcasting is that there are a lot of very contradictory stories. The way we handle it is we assume that everything is true. It's easier that way. So just all stories are true, even the false ones. It's just simpler. Now, the question of the day is, what is a demon? And that is a very hard question to answer. And in fact, most of the topic today is going to be answering that question. So be aware, the definition of demon changes over time significantly. In the book Pandemonium, a visual history of demonology, which is on the table over there, the author, Ed Simon, who is also the name of the author of the Necronomicon, which has caused some confusion, suggests that demons are changeable symbols. And over time, they can mean very different things and very contradictory things, particularly big names like Satan. There is no clear distinction between the ideas of art, literature, religion, and magic. These are the same basic concepts, and the further you go back, the more the lines are blurred. Gilgamesh is divine, or half-divine, he's a demigod. He may also be a real king, and he may also be named in religious documents. It all blurs as you get towards the BCs and further. Demons, as we're going to be talking about them today, are evil, or at least very troublesome and problematic. But they're still the divine. They're a part of the divine energy, the world of God. They have the same DNA as angels and gods. So I think of them as the malign divine, but they are usually part of the sacred world. That's important because the lines between angels and demons blurs a lot. And one thing I want to emphasize today is that a history of demonology is a history of the world. The cultural shifts that cause demons to arise are changes in morality and religion. There was a big one in 200 BC when the Jews were destroyed by, 60 BC when the Jews were destroyed by Rome, lots of exorcisms. And 300 AD when the Christians were being persecuted by Rome, lots of exorcisms. Demons were very active there. And the 2 biggest periods of exorcism activity and demonic feistiness are the Reformation and today, because we are in a time of great religious strife. This is one of the highest peak demonic activity periods. And it's nice that we all get to experience it together. But one thing I can address is, what do demons look like? Demons look like kings, magic star people, dragons, guys on bears, bears on guys, your last boyfriend, easy musician, creepy face about green guys, red Peter Pan, goats, goat guys, angels, ICP Raphaelite red flags, fire-breathing wolves, hot lion dudes, whatever this is, whatever that is, things I can't show mom, giant flies, toilet guys, and beer. I love beer. For the most part, this presentation is going to go chronologically, starting with Mesopotamia and working its way to yesterday. But there's one concept that runs through much of this. It may be the oldest practiced form of magic there is. That is goetic magic. Goetic magic is magic using 72 demons. It's basically hermetic magic and angel stuff, but with demons. And it's ancient. It goes back at least to 300 AD and further. There's some misconceptions about the Goetia. First off, the idea that the Goetia are like the most powerful demons. They're not. They're named demons that we can work with and summon and conjure if we choose to, and are that sort of person. They're useful for spells and incantations, and if you read their descriptions, they read like the D&D player's manual. The idea of the Goetia started around 200 AD in the Testament of Solomon, which is Bible fanfic, written by Christians, but built on Jewish sources. Really influential in modern demonology and all demonology. And then in the Renaissance, it kind of re-emerged and exploded because people were treating demons like Pokemon and adding their own to the list. But it kind of stabilized on 72 demons. That is a magic number. It is the same number as your tarot cards, count them. And it's based on 360 decans of the zodiac divided by 3. Really fun. May have had ties to ancient Egypt. It may have been, it's a very mixed bag of demons. You'll recognize some of them. Baal, big name Baal. Paimon, who you might remember from Hereditary, great movie. Let's see. Stolas, any hell of a boss fans. Asmodeus. I like this because this one shows both the Vivzipop version with the 3 heads and the 1850 version with 3 heads. And they're the same basic heads, just very different interpretations of them. And some ones you might not recognize, Amon, Andromelech. Someone today told me that Andromelech is actually Satan before Satan became Satan. That's interesting. I don't know. There's spirits that are used in spells. You can buy those spells for the low, low price of whatever 132-page handwritten grimoire costs in the early Renaissance. From here, we will skip to Mesopotamia. Actually, pause. Any questions? Croatia? Yes?
What is...
Mesopotamia is a kingdom, or an empire really, that's where Iran and Iraq are now in the Middle East, where Israel is. And it started like 7,000 years ago. The first cities and the first writing are from this area. It's ancient. It is where civilization began, allegedly. It's also where a lot of the early demons come from. Some of the oldest demons we deal with regularly are based on the biblical traditions and period. That runs from about 800 BC to about 180 or so. And a lot of those demons come from the gods and spirits and things of the Mesopotamian region, which, like I said, is where Iran is now. They have a mythology that runs back to about 4,500 BC and a written history that goes to about 2,500 BC. 2,500 BC. Ancient civilization. Let's see. Mesopotamian cities, this is kind of the real world link. Mesopotamian cities are the first cities. We're dealing with like The word means first. And Uruk and Babylon, things like that. And their religion and their mythology was distinctly urban. The gods lived in a city. The gods had the powers granted by civilization. The gods chose not to share them with humanity until one of the gods leaked them. And then a lot of people died. They went to the underworld, which is a city. City good, wilderness bad. So their demonology kind of reflects that because demons are creatures of the wilderness. What is a demon? Bear in mind, Babylon or Semitic languages do not have a word for demon. Hebrew does not have a word for demon either. The word is spirits, and maybe good spirits, maybe bad spirits. So yeah, these are bad spirits. They're like gods, but they're less than gods. We don't worship them. That's one of the big distinctions. They're creatures of the wilderness, spirits of the wild. And if you look at Irish or Hebrew or ancient mythology, the wilderness is the underworld. The further you go out, the more you get into fairyland, the land of the dead, that sort of thing. These ideas kind of blur. Strange and unknown and divine is over there somewhere. For a long time, hell was located in England. That may still be accurate, I don't know. They're bringers of plague, insanity, that sort of thing. But they can be invoked for positive effect. We'll talk about that soon. They're not necessarily destroying all of humanity, but they are antagonistic forces that usually work with the gods. But really, have you seen the gods? They're pretty awful. Ishtar had the power to destroy cities. Anyway, now we'll talk about 2 big-name demons, Lamashtu, you might not know her, and Pazuzu, you almost certainly do. These are a pair that, well, one of them goes back to about 5,000 BC. and that is Lamashtu, who was a child-killing demon. She was a demon of cradle death, of suffocating the young, that sort of thing. Now, in Egyptian and Mesopotamian and Hebrew magic, you will get a lot of references to fertility, childbirth, child protection. One of the reasons for this was that the world population was about the same as the DFW complex is now, that size. So every person counted so much. Like, your children were literally your future. The species could die at any time after one plague. So it was important to monitor the children, and Lamashtu was very bad about killing them. That was her thing. If you play D&D, the word Lamia comes from Lamashtu, ultimately, another kind of scary, deadly, dark female figure. Lilith is related to her. If you go back far enough, they're probably the same creature. We'll talk about Lilith soon. But if you want to fight evil, scary thing, you need a bigger evil, scary thing. And if you want to fight a child-stealing female principal goddess demon, you need a demon with a really, really huge scorpion tail. This is Pazuzu. He has a scorpion tail, lion's head, snake-headed penis. He's the king of the demons in his propaganda. In his propaganda, he goes back to about 4000 BCE. In practice, he's from about 700 BCE, like the biblical period. He's a very recent demon, and a very popular one. You can find so much Pazuzu jewelry if you happen to be shopping in 700 BC. Medallions and things like this. Is a demon. He's a demon of plague and the desert wind. But he fights Lamashtu. He scares Lamashtu off, and that made him insanely popular. This is not a real statue, by the way. People do ask sometimes. This is from The Exorcist. He's also really popular because of The Exorcist, which is a movie that resurrected the art of exorcism for this century. Funny world. Lilith. Everybody that's into demons knows Lilith's name. She is allegedly the first wife of Adam. Funny things about that story. In practice, she's a demon goddess sort of thing, an undertaker spirit, a spirit of death that goes back to about 4000 BC. She's from a tribe of demons called the Lilin. Yeah, that's the female version of the word Lilith, which is just demon, basically. Or spirits, night spirits. Her name actually translates into owl. So there's some Bible verses that, depending on what translation you read, either mean like demon queen, dark princess thing, and owl. It depends on what you're reading. But she is kind of a night bird creature, and that's fairly common in her iconography. Oh, there's an owl in that picture, actually. A story about how she's Adam's first wife comes from the rabbinical period, the rabbinical writing period, which is like in the 700 to 1300 period, where the Kabbalah is being expanded on, the Talmud is being written. The story is that God made Adam a wife, and she didn't want to be second to Adam. She didn't want Adam to sleep on top, basically. And so she stole the four-letter sacred name of God and used it to turn into a bird and fly away, and God had to send 4 lawyers after her. And this is a satirical piece. It's a comedy called From the Alphabet of Ben Sirach. But the story's become very popular in kind of modern lore, even though it's biblically nothing at all. She's fairly popular as a demon in general, but she doesn't really appear. She appears once or twice in the Bible in some very hazy places. But this story of her being a rebellion against gender norms and stereotypes, although it's the first couple, so is there really such a thing? I don't know. That's a very modern invention, but it's really carried. Like Lilith Fair is a big feminist rock concert, or was. She's kind of become a goddess of female empowerment, and that's really cool. She's also part of a weird polycule in the Garden of Eden, where she breaks up with Adam, and then she and her 3 sisters, the demons of sacred prostitution, marry and break up with Samael, the angel of death. Samael sleeps with Eve and gives birth to Cain. Lilith sleeps with Adam and gives birth to a lot of demons. Lilith shares her beauty tips with Eve, so that's kind of nice. God castrates Samael, which seems rude. And there's some idea of she either sleeping with or being Leviathan and humping with Samael, who's also Leviathan, and then hold that image in your head for a few days. She doesn't appear in Has Been Hotel yet, but that picture is in the portrait wall in the back of the hotel. You can see it kind of in passing. One more fun one from Babylon, because I'm going to be running out of time very soon, I think. That is Sulak, the toilet demon. He's one of the class of lurker demons in Babylon and Sumerian mythology. There's a lot of them. They hide in alleys and pounce on people. He's specifically associated with the bathroom and with the diseases and filth and insanity that can come from the bathroom, which means their cleaning is probably worse than mine. He's a lion. There's a lot of lions in demonology. And his name means dirty paws, or maybe monster of the bathroom. Yeah, I like that. He's the first monster of the bathroom, and he's pretty cool. Let's talk about Egypt briefly. I don't want to talk too deeply about Egypt because Egypt is not very important religiously, but very important as a source of spirit ideas. And it's got a very confusing history of like 3,000 years. I just don't want to deal. But I will briefly say that the Old Kingdom, which runs from 2700 onward, is where the idea of a demon, really carried the idea of demons as plague bearers and disorder things, like the Mesopotamians did. Demons are arbitrary forces there. And this is a period where the Pharaoh king served the power of order, and yet it was called. This is the idea of order and harmony, and the gods, civilization, and all of us in our daily lives support harmony and hold back disorder by our actions, by our rituals, by our prayers. This idea breaks down at the end of this period because the last pharaoh of this period, whose name was Pepi II, or Pepi II, Pepi, I think of him, had a reign of 64 years, which is incredible, and died around 100. And by the end of that, he wasn't really looking very godly. So after that, and after a messy succession period and several plagues, there was lack of faith in the empire and the idea of the city-state god thing that carried through the next few hundred years. The Middle Kingdom, demons were kind of, well, in the Middle Kingdom period, the funeral practice became democratized a little bit more. If you could afford it, you could get into the afterlife. The afterlife in Egypt was not bad. It was more agriculture, but you get people to do some of that work for you. Their afterlife was just kind of more life. Anyway, demons in that version of the story tended to be guardians of the gates, obstacles on your soul's journey, because that was kind of a primary mythic focus of this period. The Middle Kingdom ended very abruptly when a group called the Hyksos took over. The Hyksos is a Semitic tribe, and I'm not going to say that this is the only instance of a Semitic tribe like the Jews being kicked out of Egypt, because that's been debunked, but it's still a fun story. They kicked around for like 200 years as pharaohs, these Semitic people, and they were eventually kind of ostracized. They still stuck around in the area. But again, there was a lot of lack of faith in the government in this period. They were followers of Baal, who is considered like one of the big name demons now. And they looked at the god Seth, the kind of donkey, weird thing god, who I think is very hot. And they thought, hey, I like him. So they became Seth cultists for a while. And their empire. And after that, there's been kind of a rumor that Seth is like the god of evil after that. It's not really true, but he did get his name kind of smeared and he became less. There was some scattered disowning of Seth as a god. He's kind of a buff god of chaos and strength and power. But after that, some people were saying, that's another thing. Still in service to order and Miet, though. He was the one that held back the servant Apep as the pharaoh's barge crossed the sea every night. Sky sea every night. More about Apep later. The New Kingdom kind of followed that, and there was not much faith at all in the empire right now. Demons were frequently invoked in curses, and Egypt probably deserves its reputation as like kingdom of dark sorcery because there was a lot of magic. Everybody wore medallions and things like that. There were a lot of curses. Demons were invoked to, deal with your neighbors that you don't like very much, that sort of thing. Very magical kingdom, not that death-focused really. That's kind of a popular image of them, but they did like their funerals. They're very big funerals. Now summoning Apep. Apep, as we just spoke, is the serpent that devours the world. His other names are the Serpent of the Nile, the Evil Dragon, the Eater of Souls, spawned from the waters of primordial chaos, very much like Tiamat and Leviathan in that regard. He would attack the barge of Ra at night, and all the gods would fight him. And they'd be victorious if everybody prayed and worshipped him in the right way, just like Tinkerbell clapping so she doesn't die. There was an annual ritual called the Banishing of Chaos, where there'd be a statue of Apep, and everybody would shove the darkness and evil of the land into him and burn it, but he would worship him. There were a lot of good spells devoted to him in the priest manual, called the Book of Overthrowing Apep, including spitting upon Apep, defiling Apep with the left foot, the right, taking a knife to smite Apep, and putting fire upon Apep. As an exercise, you can add more spells to this list if you'd like to. Think of some. Skipping ahead, ancient Judaism, this period runs from about 1000 BCE to about 100 AD. This is the period where the Israelite religion was formed, and that was a polytheistic, we better just go to the timeline, that was a polytheistic faith. It was based on the Canaanite religion that came before in the Sumerian Mesopotamian church. And they had like over 130 gods. It was very confusing. And the Israelite faith kind of winnowed that down to like 4 or 5 or 6. They had El, who's like father god in the sky with a beard. Baal, who's I'd say a soldier god, really. He's kind of like a warrior god. And then they added, at around 1,700, they added Yahweh, or Yah, or 1,000 other names. And he's kind of a scary mountain war god. Rides in a chariot and destroys things left and right. Scary war god. And also El's wife, Asherah, who later became Yahweh's wife. Asherah, let's not examine that. Baal was Yahweh's brother. They probably had Mot, who is the Hellmouth deity, basically. Yam, who is the goddess of the sea, and some associated star goddesses and things like that. But for the most part, it was like a four-god pantheon, much reduced from the 130 that came before. And the next 800 years or so is a process of slowly getting rid of those gods. For El, it was easy. Yahweh basically ate him. For Baal, it became this ongoing struggle that the Bible was just filled with stories of like the Egyptians and Baal worshippers fighting the Israelites. The Israelites worshipped Baal. We just don't talk about that. But another story that you get a lot with the history of ancient Israel and Judaism is the consolidation of power in Jerusalem, centralizing worship in the temple, centralizing the standards of worship in the temple, and centralizing the idea of God as living in Jerusalem, very specifically. In Mesopotamian periods, gods tended to live in cities. Like Ur's god was Marduk, I think. Babylon's god was Ishtar. Gods lived in towns, and every town had their own god that was worshipped in a big way. Israel was kind of like that. Yahweh was the god of Israel, one of many gods that were children to El. I'm going somewhere with this. Eventually, I'll get to demons. A lot more other elements of this culture is that this period is that over and over again, Israel is taken over by outside powerful forces. Israel's a very small player. It was a while before Egypt even noticed that they'd taken them over. The Neo-Assyrian takeover was kind of, it broke up the Jewish royalty pattern, but they still left Jerusalem intact and the first temple intact. Solomon's temple is the first temple in the word First Temple Judaism, and it's got this legacy of being kind of the golden age of early Israelite worship, but also it has resonances throughout all demonology because Solomon is the name in Hermetic demon summoning and angel control magic. There's probably no justification for that, but the idea that Solomon's temple was built by angels and demons is a big part of his story later on. And there are so many modern grimoires and Middle Ages grimoires that have his name because if you write the word Solomon on it, it just seems better. The Babylonian Empire, the Zoroastrians took over in about 586, and they really destroyed the temple and kidnapped about 25% of the people of Judea and took them away. The story of Daniel and his brothers in the coat of many colors comes from this period. Daniel was taken away to Babylon. History. It happens. And towards the middle of the Babylonian Empire period, the Babylonians became they had a good relationship with the Jews. They rebuilt the temples, the Second Temple period, where things get weird. The Jews built colleges and studied things and wrote the Torah and ultimately the Hebrew Bible during this period. It was a very big period for Jewish scholarship and a fairly tame period for demons, not a lot of them, until we get to 300-ish when the Greeks take over, more chaos. 100 where the Jews where some purist warrior Jews set up their own kingdom, and then Rome says, oh, what the heck, and just obliterates everybody. And then we have Jesus Christ Superstar, Jesus Christ, and that period, and Jesus. Rome destroyed the Jewish ownership of their own country and scattered them to the four winds. That was like the end of Jewish state. Zoroastrianism is important. In the Persian faiths, Zoroastrianism in particular, had a strong element of good versus evil epic storyline. The very Lord of the Rings, very summer blockbuster. Not God, but the force of creation, Ahura Mazda, and Angramayu, the force of evil, kind of fought each other and worked to build the world together, but ultimately the force of evil was going to be destroyed in a pit of fire. That word comes up a few times too. And from here, the Jewish faith didn't really have a strong sense of evil yet because they started as a polytheism. And you can always blame evil on other kingdoms at that point, which they did. But when they kind of got the idea of Persian dualism, they started getting the idea of kind of an anti-god figure or the bad guy figure in the pantheon. And you start getting the idea of the devil starts developing. That is a figure that is at least opposed to mankind, if not actually directly opposed to God. Before then, Satan, who appears in the book of Job and maybe in the book of Genesis, isn't really a bad guy. He's just annoying. He's basically God's prosecuting attorney. The word Satan means the adversary, and he was basically a court figure. There's a concept called the divine council. I'm still bopping around, which is that El worked in... Hi, are you a fan?
Yes.
I got all their albums.
I'm sorry, I was just very excited about the divine.
It's a really cool idea. In one of the Psalms, I read about this in high school, and I was like, this changes everything. God is described as sitting at the head of the council of gods. That is the divine council. The word Elohim is the plural form of God, which implies the divine council. This is a group of spirits, angels, demons, gods, ancestor spirits, monstery things, that work together in concert with God to help build the world. In the beginning, God moved over the waters and created the earth, but the word God is plural in that form. El, God, Elohim, many gods, many spirits. The watcher demon angels, watcher angels are called the Beni Elohim, the children of heaven as well. In Mesopotamia, the children of heaven referred to the 70 children of hell. But the divine council, short form, the divine council is a spiritual body that works with God and helps do his task. And in the book of Job, Satan goes to address the divine council. Satan is a part of that council. Hold on to that. But he's not a bad guy. He's just really irritating. As we get later and we embrace more dualism, the question of theodicy comes up. Theodicy is a really good word to argue with people. It is the question of how can God allow evil? Huge question. Really, like that broke my faith in Christianity, just trying to deal with that question. The early Jewish church didn't worry about it because they had a polytheism. But as they reduced, as there was more of a single God, they had to question where that evil came from. Maybe that evil came from an adversary like Satan. Maybe it came from a box that, like, some woman opened. Women always create evil. Maybe it came from San Antonio. Maybe it came from gigantic half-angel cannibal monstrosities whose mortal forms died in the Great Flood, for example. What are demons? Again, they don't have the word demon. The word is shedim, like bad spirits, and like bad spirits specifically. In this case, I think I like calling demons the malign divine. They're the dark side of God, its troublesome servants. They may actually be God in another form. They cause disease, death, etc. But they work with angels. They test humanity, and they serve on the divine council. And you can talk to them. It is not illegal in Jewish law to have a conversation with a demon. It may be illegal to summon one because that's sorcery. But if you get your friend to do it, like your friend in Egypt, go ahead. They're not bad people. They're just tricky. And that idea actually carries through the modern age in some ways. Now summoning Beelzebub. Judaism's enemy number one was not Satan. It was Baal and many other things like Baal. Now, Baal means chief, basically. It later became a single god, Baal, probably who killed Tiamat and went to the land of the dead and things like that, shades of Jesus. But for the most part, there's like 70 or so different Baals, because that word just means chief. Beelzebub, as the devil could say, Beelzebub started as Baal Zephon, I think, which is Baal of the great house, or chief of the heavens sort of thing. But the Jews had a really great shade campaign on him. They started calling him Baal-zebul or Baal-zebub, which means chief of the dung heap. And it stuck. And now he's kind of Lord of the Flies, etc., and seen as one of the more powerful demons. Baal-zebub is frequently seen as like the Satan, the head of hell, that sort of thing. And there's a really good story about that one. What's my time, by the way?
10:11.
Thank you. Okay, so Jesus just died. It was a Friday sort of thing. This is Bible fanfic from about 300 AD, Testament of Nicodemus. Jesus died, and a few days later, like 2 days later, there were zombies showing up, and they were kind of saying, "Hey, Jesus died," and people questioned them as to what these zombies did, what these zombies were about, what happened to Jesus. And they told this story of Jesus going to hell, and the story, which is called the Harrowing of Hell. Okay, so circle around a bit. Baal-zebub and Satan and Death, and possibly the female Death, there was Lady Death, were chatting on the front porch of hell. And Satan said, "Oh, you'll never guess what I did. That guy, that Jesus guy? Yeah. Oh, I got him so good. Yeah, what'd you do? Oh, I had him killed." And Beelzebub says, "Oh, that Jesus? Yeah, I got him big time on a stick. He's like this, 3 days of suffering. The Jesus that can resurrect the dead. Yeah. We are in the land of the dead. Yeah. Do you see a problem with that? No." And they look up, and there's a purple light on the horizon that storms towards them. Jesus shows up riding in the front of a bunch of angels, and Beelzebub takes 2 steps back and kicks Satan out the door. And Jesus smashes the gates of hell down on him, jumps up and down onto him, takes all of the people that had died, the good dead, not the bad ones, obviously, turns to Beelzebub. Beelzebub says, "Hey, do you like what I did there with Satan?" And Jesus said, "Yes, you can be in charge of hell until I get back." And he takes everybody up in a white thing and goes to heavens, and there's about a bunch of hallelujahs at that point. And that's what happened between Good Friday and Easter. True story, sort of true story. So Beelzebub is kind of seen as the regent king of hell up to like the 1900s. Less so now. I think Satan and Lucifer are kind of the big chiefs now, but he's got that flavor to him. And there's a funny thing: if you've ever been a chief of hell, once you've been the chief of hell, you start carrying the mythology of everybody that's been the chief of hell. So a lot of these powerful demons that are like king of hell, Asmodeus, Baal, Satan, Lucifer, they're synonyms in some ways. Like most people wouldn't bother telling them apart. They're kind of different names for the same thing. They're still unique entities. Beelzebub has his own story, but they get conflated and they get turned into the same kind of myth, and their ideas start being shared between each other. It's just something that happens. Baal kind of references an earlier faith, a more polytheistic faith, and I think that Azazel also has some of the same energy to him. I really like Azazel. He's one of the demons that gets the biggest coverage in the Bible because in Leviticus, God gives clear instructions for how to get rid of sin once a year in the temple, the big temple. You come and you take two goats. They got to be both good goats, high quality goats. Flip a coin. One of them gets sacrificed to God, which is a good thing. The other one gets driven into the wilderness that is called Azazel, and carries the sins of the people away into the wilderness, and sometimes he's thrown down a cliff. This is the scapegoat ritual, which you've heard of, and it's very old. There's some question of whether Azazel is a demon or a place or just the concept of the wilderness, because again, wilderness bad, wilderness where bad things happen, wilderness is where demons live. But it's hard to say. The jury is out on that. But he is considered the king of the hairy goat demons, which makes me very happy. He's probably a Canaanite god. His name means strength of El, but it's kind of hazy there. There's a scene in the New Testament, which is not in Jesus Christ Superstar, where Jesus goes into the wilderness and he talks to Satan, and he's tempted by Satan. Jesus is the scapegoat. He's going to be carrying the sins of the people into wherever it goes. And he hears the voice of a demon there. And I think that voice is probably Azazel. And that's really cool to me, that this voice can echo after 1,000 years like that. Azazel Azazel is also one of the Watcher angels. And Watcher angels are very big with video game people because they gave birth to the Nephilim. The Nephilim are sort of giant monstery things in some stories. In other stories, they're just heroes, actually, folk heroes. But in the book of Enoch, 200 BC, they are considered the spawn of these angels who came down from heaven to earth, saw that earth girls are sexy, decided, I want to have a baby with them. And 200 or so of these creatures, led by Azazel and Shemaiah, slept with human ladies and had angel babies, and the angel human babies. And those angel human babies became huge monstrous things that would eat other angel human babies. That's not bad, I guess. But there's a lot of mess and destruction and chaos and eating all the crops and things like that. It looked like the Lion King when Scar takes over. And God did not approve of these relationships. God has a very big hang about cleanliness, and sex is kind of part of the unclean world. Mesopotamians were really keen on sex. They had like a 7-day sex scene in Gilgamesh, 2 7-day sex scenes, and some gay minotaur sex. So God said, okay, there's too many cannibal angel babies. Let's wipe them out. And he sent the flood, and the flood wiped all these demon babies out, angel babies out. They're not demon babies. Their soul, because they were half immortal, their immortal souls bubbled up to the surface of the water and became possessing demons. And that's how evil entered the world. It wasn't the Garden of Eden. It was angel baby cannibal demon souls. True story. Now, so Azazel is one of these Watcher things, but there's an older story about the Watchers from the Mesopotamian period, where a group of 7 sages, 7 half man, half god, half fish sages, apparently, took the secrets of heaven, the secrets of civilization, taught them to humans so that humans would not be destroyed by the flood. And that pissed off the gods so much that they sent the flood. But these sages still worked to kind of protect humanity. And they taught the secrets like the Watchers taught. The Watchers taught the secrets of like makeup and hair care and metallurgy and things like that to the humans. That was one of the bad things they did, was they taught God stuff to them. The Apkallu, these spirits, did the same thing, these sages. And another word for Apkallu is watcher. So that legend kind of carries in a more positive way and less kind of down on women way from that side of the world. And this is how Jesus would have understood how evil entered the world. Angel lady monsters. What's next? Oh, suddenly Satan's. So this is my podcast episode last week, actually. In about 200-ish or so, there was a boom in the idea of Satan's, or the idea of anti-divine figures. Azazel and Shemael were probably some of the earlier ones, but they were still angels. They never really fell. They get punished forever for what they did, but they didn't fall. But there were a series of things that were more opposed to God. And we have, in that list, we have Belial, whose name means worthlessness. He's kind of a lawless person, very antichrist figure, actually. His name turns up all over the place in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were written mostly during that kind of 150 to 50 period where the Romans were stomping up and down on people. Other Satans that turn up a lot here. This is where the king of evil idea really starts to grow, and Rome really starts to become a problem. Mastema is the spirit of wickedness. Mastema is also the angel that led Pharaoh against the Jews. So he's kind of a tormenting angel, an angel of death and wrath. Asmodeus comes from Persia. He's the Persian spirit of wrath, and he's seen as the king of the demons and the king of the jinn, actually, in the Testament of Solomon later on. Kind of a bit player. Angel of darkness that is kind of opposed. It's like the demon on your left shoulder, angel on your right, that kind of demon of darkness. There are all these ideas for the spiritual personification of evil that were really floating around this time period, just kind of bubbling to the surface as people struggled with the idea of how can evil be in the world, demon evils. But by the time of Jesus, the title of Satan, the adversary, had become more of a proper noun. Satan was seen more often as an entity, little guy, tight red suit. And the Greeks kind of imported the idea of the devil. And that kind of unified together. So we started getting the idea of a single force of evil, specifically opposed to God, or at least devoted to breaking up humanity's relationship with God. Got Belial here, Mastema from Shin Megami Tensei, Samael, who's one of my favorites. I like him a lot. He seems big and dumb. Anyway, some of these early Satan figures. Brief aside in Greece, I have to learn more about Iamblichus. The other demon people tell me that I really need to. He's apparently big into Neoplatonism and taught math and magic and kind of harmony of things, and is a huge name in grimoires because he kind of is the origins of Hermetic style magic. We'll get to that later on. Greece brought the idea of punitive afterlife to the world. Tartarus is one of the 4 layers of Greek underworld. The others are not so bad, but Tartarus is where the Titans go originally. And then later on in the cycle, people that did really, really, really unforgivably bad things like incest got put there. And then later on, kind of bad people got put there to burn forever. It wasn't a big thing. It was really for the worst sinners, but it was a punitive afterlife for humans. Before the afterlife was just kind of like big, empty, gray, dusty box forever. But the Greeks kind of adapted it and added a little element of judgment and some happily ever after stuff as well. When in the book of Enoch, the watchers are thrown into the fiery pit, the verb that they use is tartaru, which comes from Tartarus. And it's a fun thing to say. The Greeks gave us the word demon, sort of. They gave us the word daemon. And a daemon is a divine servant. It's less than a god. Maybe a minor god like Styx, the goddess Styx, the nymph Styx. They kind of act like angels, maybe, or tormenting demons. Satyrs kind of fall in this camp. Daemons are spirits that can teach wisdom, and that also carries into the modern occult interpretation of demon. But they're not really demons as we understand them. They're not anti-divine. They're not bad. This period is where we start getting into the idea of 12 heavenly gods multiplied by X, Y, and Z to create 72 gods, which starts to be the origins of the Goetic pantheon later on. They go back that far in certain forms. From here, we get to the medieval period, which is about 300 to about 1400 or so. And this is not a great period for demons. Like I said, demons thrive in spiritual chaos and religious turmoil. The Middle Ages weren't that bad. It was not a bad place to live, really. I mean, there's a lot of disease, and you could get killed for all sorts of reasons. but the witch hunts weren't happening. It wasn't the Dark Ages. That's really a misnomer. In this time period, we had a lot of journeys through hell. Like an angel would take you and say, "This is what you're going to do for the rest of your life if you don't abandon your sins." The biggest one of these is Dante's Inferno, which kind of actually ended the idea of the hell journey as a vision model of literature because Dante did it so well. But that was a big thing. A whole school of literature about taking people into hell. One of them is really funny. The Journey of Tundle. Tundle is a big, burly knight who's a heavy drinker, and he probably deserves to die or to burn. But he gets over it. But he's a really funny character. Demons did not really do so well in this period. They were kind of seen as foolish. There's an idea that's from the medieval period called the Great Chain of Being. You might associate this with feudalism. The idea is that God is at the top, then Jesus, then spirits of various sorts, then kings, then guys, then girls, presumably furries. Lions are at the top of the list because they have human-like faces. Butternut squash is higher than trees in the Great Chain of Being because you can eat it. And this basically is a way of categorizing the entire universe in a hierarchical structure. And heaven had a military structure like this, heaven had a feudal structure like this. So naturally, hell had a feudal structure as well. And you start getting very military demons. They weren't very good at it, though, because God had won. Now, if you remember the story of the Testament of Nicodemus, where Jesus stubbed Satan up and down to the ground, God was in control. It was his world. There wasn't really this threat of demons. They were kind of foolish things. There's some good stories, like a priest that a priest village wanted to build a bridge across the nearby creek, and they didn't have the resource to do it. So the priest called up Satan and said, "Hey, Satan, I will ask for your help to build this bridge." And Satan says, "Sure, I will do this for you. But if I do, you will give me the first soul of the creature you will give me the first soul to cross the bridge." And Satan waved his magic, whatever he waved. I have some theories, and built the bridge. And the priest said, "Okay, send in the chicken." And Satan, cursed him and flew away. So demons and Satans and devils, things like that, were kind of comedy figures. They were kind of the background to the heavenly journey of the soul. They weren't really bad. They were still part of God's plan. They were just really dickish. Medieval was a demon. Troublesome and willful spirits were part of God's plan. And folk story monsters, really. They weren't the scary bad guys they become very soon, because coming up very soon is the Gutenberg press, and that changes everything. Orneus. I love Orneus for weird reasons. First off, he's a gay, furry vampire demon, and I think that's cool. Orneus is the first spirit that Solomon conjured from the demonic realm, and through Orneus he got the true names of Asmodeus, and through Asmodeus he learned to conquer and control all demons, and that's why Solomon has such powerful magic. He got it from Orneus. Orneus is, he can turn into a lion, he can turn into fire, he can turn into a guy. There's some strange queer coding with him. When Solomon was kind of clued in, there was this figure. Orneus was stalking his younger male workers in the construction site, stealing half their lunch, which is why he's called the half-eater, and sucking their souls through their thumbs. Kind of like that. It was a euphemism for another part of the body that has a certain thumb-like quality. And when Solomon is questioning him, he says something along the lines of, "When I turn into a man, I prey on young, effeminate boys, and my touch hurts them." I feel like there's some kind of anti-Greek homosexuality coding there. And of course, Jews and Christians are very down on sex in this period anyway. But it's an interesting story, and it's one of the rare ones that implies that a demon has a sexual appetite. That is unusual. I don't know why it only happens when he's incarnated as a man. I kind of think he's hot. I have problems, though, fairly honestly. Lucifer, as the prince of hell, comes from this period as well. There's a story in the Bible of a figure named Lucifer falling, but it's not known what that figure is, and it does not become the king of hell. It is a creature that falls from heaven and loses his position of glory because maybe he sought the throne of God, but that could be a human king. There's a theory that it's a Mesopotamian god named Hellel, meaning the shining one, who knows? But it's not seen as being like the devil. That is a year 300 idea that priests, that the church fathers like, Origen, that big guy, that other big guy, they have beards, kind of promulgated. Until then, though, he was just a spirit. But after that, the church fathers agreed that evil entered the world. They're redefining evil through the fall of Lucifer from heaven. And that created that took away 1/3 of the host of heaven. They all became demons. And that's where evil came from. That became the dominant narrative of evil for the next few hundred years or so. But Lucifer, time and again, is very gimpy. I think of him as the gimpy Satan because in some versions he's like, in Dante, he's like frozen in ice. In another version, he's a giant dragon that is chained to the walls of hell and people go in and out of his mouth. In the vision of Tundle, he's like on a barbecue pit spitting salt in the air. Satan is just screwed because he's crippled, because Jesus jumped up and down on him in that early narrative. Satan is helpless and not that big of a threat. Demons can tempt people, they can't hurt them. They're not really dangerous. And the gimpy Satan kind of dominates this period up to about 1400. He also kind of later becomes like the romantic version of the devil. There's some text in the corner. I wonder what that's supposed to say. But by and large, he's not really dangerous or a threat. And if you'll remember at the time, like in the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church was kind of it. It was the big thing. But a couple of things happened around 1400, 1500 or so. The Gutenberg Press becomes a thing. Religious materials can be published. The King James Bible is published in the native language of many English speakers. And Martin Luther nails his theses to the wall and breaks up the Catholic Church in Germany, north area, I think Germany. And suddenly, the church that was monolithic becomes splintered. And enemies were everywhere all of a sudden because your church was divided and like Satan must have done that. So there's this great othering that happens, very much like in the year 100 or so when all of the sins of the world were blamed on foreign powers. In the Reformation, people started looking for Satans among their friends. The witch hunts start turning up in here, and this is the church is looking for enemies, and they look for real demons to make sure that people can. They look for real demons, and specifically they're looking for women that are having sex with demons, because physical demon manifestations prove that there is a god, and that's kind of the subtext of the witch hunts in that period. Is these hunts prove the validity of the church, and that's why they're very, very active and dedicated people looking for these things. In another episode of this presentation, I talk a lot about the various penises of Lucifer. That was a really fun piece of research for me. If Google ever shares my search results, I happen there, it's going to be a mess. The Middle Ages were the golden age of hell, but this is the golden age for demons. There are demons everywhere. So many heresy trials, so many things like that. And simultaneously, there's the idea of the Renaissance, which is not really a distinct period, and it's really not like a universal thing. It's kind of centered in Italy. But in the Renaissance period, scholars from Italy discover these manuscripts from Greece and Egypt and Old Hebrew manuscripts. They start reading the Hebrew Bible. They read the Testament of Solomon from 300, and they try to learn the Kabbalah and things like that. In the Renaissance period, there's not really a distinction between science and poetry. Dangerous period, really. So like myth and analogy was a good way of understanding the natural world, and the Kabbalah and things like it were systems of magic that explained the world. And so a lot of very educated people were looking at these magical systems, trying to understand their own Christian faiths, their world, the way it's put together, what things mean. And in these books, they discover angel names, and they can use those angel names to call on demon names. And these books of secret relationships between angels and demons start popping up. And they're not black magic because they're using god names to control demons, to get the girl or to get money or whatever. That's god magic, just god magic for us. There's a very ambivalent relationship between the religious leaders of this period and demons because they're useful tools. Priests don't have a lot of money too, so they're doing a lot of like magic spell writing on the side to give things to housewives to cast on their husbands, etc. There's an idea of the clerical demonic underground is a big thing here. The educated class is mostly priests. They have these old names, they have these old languages, and they can use them to write very convincing spells. What's next? I should stop babbling. Oh, Binsfeld's hierarchy. So there are a lot of resources published for witch hunters. Binsfeld's classification of demons is among them. It's in a treatise on evildoer and witch confessions. There's a lot of that sort of thing. And I've read this one. It's kind of boring. But you can see a lot of the names that you'll see in Hello Vassar here. Lucifer is the prince of pride. Mammon is the prince of greed. Asmodeus, lust. Leviathan, who is basically a sea serpent and a beast, is the princess of envy. I don't understand that one. Strange choices. This is not really canonical or biblical at all. It's just kind of a series of ideas because something had to be in charge of something. It's the Middle Ages, for heaven's sakes. But this idea is still popular today. The Princess of Hell is an idea that it turns up in animated films for sure. People to talk about now. Let's talk about King James and Heinrich Kramer. They both have lovely beards. Well, actually, in this picture, Kramer doesn't. Never mind, they don't have lovely beards necessarily. But King James, who commissioned the King James Bible, wrote a book on demonology. It's called Demonology. And basically he says, so there's this idea that witches cast spells on people. And you may have heard that this is not true, that this is just illusions of mind and dementia and things like that. It's not true at all, they're real spells. And the King of England starts kind of putting out this idea that, yeah, these are real things that are really happening to real people. And that heightens the witch hunt frenzy. Heinrich Kramer wrote the Malleus Maleficarum, which I think in this pile as well. This is the book of hunting witches. It talks a lot about pacts with devils and hiding men's penises in trees, even though I feel like they could look down and say, oh, there's my penis. It's not in a tree, but there you go. Mass hysteria is a funny thing. Really skipping around a lot. But anyway, these guys are very influential in the idea of the physical world of the demon. This is one of the very few periods where, yeah, conclusively demons did have bodies. Obviously they did. Otherwise they couldn't sleep with all the women. For them, a demon is a dangerous monster that attacks people and possesses people. It is a member of the anti-divine army, actually opposed to God. That is kind of a new concept because previously, even in the Middle Ages, demons were part of God's plan. Not anymore. They are there to overthrow the divine. They're not going to win, of course, obviously. That's not in doubt. One of my favorite demons from this side of things is Leonard, who is also named Lucifuge Roquefort, if you are into your grimoire technology and things like that. I got pictures of him. Leonard is the black goat of the Sabbath, specifically. He goes to Sabbaths, flies people around, teaches witches sorcery. Everybody kisses his butt. The goat sleeps with all the witches, etc. He is a very powerful demon. He's like basically Lucifer's right-hand person and assistant. He's in charge of the entire Pact and Black Sabbath project. He's a very big name. His other name, Lucifuge Roquefort, is basically Lucifer's answering service. When you call for a pact, you'll get Lucifuge, and he will help you through the process. If you want to sell your soul, that is in the Grand Grimoire, a very late grimoire during a period where grimoires were really kind of fun and sensational, like the Weekly World News was writing books of magic. There was actually a pulp press in the 1600s in France. The books were published in cheap paperbacks for the mass market, such as it was. They all had blue covers. So a lot of demonologist types say the blue grimoires are just crap because they're kind of overly sensational and crazy. Bat's blood! Sell your soul, make a pact! But they have some real stuff in them, well, real occultism that goes back a long ways as well. But they are kind of sensational and wacky. I like Leonard a lot. I think mostly because his name is Leonard. He's very goaty. Yeah, Leonard. At the same time, though, there's this massive surge of occult scholarship. And some people that really embody that is Henry Cornelius Agrippa, who's this crazy polymath, very learned in law and physics and science and occult. And he builds a 3 volumes of magic, kind of define the hermetic Golden Dawn style of magic that we have now. And his disciples and students brought in the demons into this. Johann Weyer made a list of the angels and their corresponding demons that you can use the angels to control the demons. These are all Christians. Like a lot of the people who wrote these early books of magic, these grimoires, these occult dark works, were Christians. They were Christian Kabbalists trying to understand the natural world and their faith through working with the spirits and these old kind of parodies of Hebrew mysticism as well. But they weren't Satanists at all. Now, there's a weird double standard here because on the one hand, you have Leonard boinking all the witches and corrupting people's souls. On the other hand, you have these demons you can work with rationally that will give you money or power or understanding foreign languages or whatever. And that's not witchcraft. Obviously, the witch is sleeping with Leonard. That's evil. That's going to corrupt men's souls and take their penises away. That's horrible stuff. But with the occultists here, these Christian occultists, no, that's not witchcraft. That's science, practically. It's very complicated science. It was research. It was natural philosophy, as the term is commonly used. And a lot of times you'll get images of Belphegor on the toilet, or Astaroth, who like has these waves of stink. People made fun of demons because you didn't want to be seen as really liking them that much if you didn't want to get burned as a sorcerer. So just kind of awkward balance that the early grimoire people really kind of played with. You didn't want to be seen as a sorcerer. You wanted to be seen as a Christian researcher. That was okay. What is a demon for these guys? They're dark spirits, kind of, but they're part of the divine plan. The Kabbalah shows that. They're magical servants and tools, and you can cash in on them. You can use their name to write spells, and the grimoires got more and more complicated as time goes on because people just add new demons so that your new book of magic has more demons than the last person. The grimoires are just like crazy piles of plagiarized occult manuscripts from other people. You can see demons popping up from one another based on what documents they stole from, and typos become demons later on. It's really easy to have typos when you have Gothic script as your like font of choice, and there's no punctuation, and the G's look just like Y's, and maybe you don't speak that language. Babble babble. Some demons that really kind of capture this period for me. Roin. I think Roin is very hot. Roin is another lion engineer. There's a lot of lion engineers, I think, because of Ornius earlier working in the temple. Vine's thing is that he blesses and consecrates textbooks and finds witches and builds things. He finds witches. So he kind of really embodies this kind of idea of the occult scholar and this anti-witch, anti-those demons as well. And he's hot. Questions? Yes?
I just had a question about kind of like the Book of Tobit,
Uh-huh.
how that kind of portrayal of demons. And there's a lot going on in there, like with like the dog following that Tobit.
Sure.
But the demon specifically that is like entering into the like cursing the wife.
Asmodeus. Yes, that's why he becomes the Prince of Lust.
Okay.
Yeah, so in the Book of Tobit, we have a story of the wife-to-be, Sarah, who a demon has been killing all of her previous fiancés. She's at like number 7 now. I don't know why Tobit agreed to marry her, but he did. And the angels told Tobit that if he burns fish livers, he'll be able to drive the demon Asmodeus away. Asmodeus is imported from Persia, and that's kind of where he starts entering the Christian mythology, the Jewish mythology as well. He's a minor demon there. Later on, he gets elevated to the status of Prince of Demons. He's actually a very powerful figure in Persian Zoroastrian lore, as he's the like main angel that serves the dark power of Angkor Manu. And he's his main angel under the name Ajme. You thought you'd get me with that one, but I knew that one.
No, that helps. Thank
you. France, 1800s. Now, I'm going to talk really, really fast now. So in France, they had a fairly liberal press that was not heavily suppressed. There was not a lot of what do you call it when you suppress books? That thing, burning. And they had a very strong occult press. Occult books are always popular, even today. So in France, there was a big liberal press that ran into the 1800s, and a lot of like learning and one-upsmanship in the world of occult documents. Big publishing industry at the time, and people discussing these books in salons. 3 people from this period would change demonology forever. And the first one is Alexis Vincent Charles Babegor de Terra Nova de Tim, who is a loony bird. He is writing from 1770 to 1810 or so. He's writing his epically boring 830-page biography of how demons persecuted him, killed his pet squirrel, and flew up his butt. He is really crazy. Later on, he gets some therapy and has all of his books burned that he can find. I do have copies of them. PDFs. His book is called Les Farfadets, or Goblins, Not All Demons from the Other World, and he believes that demons have this French-style bureaucracy where there's a butler of hell and a servant of hell and a grand eunuch of hell, and demon and Satan is the exiled king of hell, and Beelzebub, king of the Lord of the Order of the Flies, is the regent king. It's this weird like parody of the French court expressed in demons. Now, this is, of course, everything's real. This is particularly not real. This is just like one guy's crazy vision. But there's another guy. You know the Dictionary Infernal. I have a copy over here. Half of it is huge. This is a book of just occult lore. It's kind of Fortean stuff, ghost stories, that sort of thing. But it also has amazing illustrations that really sold the 1860 version of a lot of the demons, particularly a lot of the Goetic demons. It's a very big, beautiful book, very popular. And his images of demons become kind of the standard ones going forward. But he also has this one note saying, there's this guy Verviguer. He's kind of crazy and eccentric, but he writes about demons. And then in the description of all of the demons that Verviguer mentions, he lists rigorous things that he said about the demons without attributing them. There is no bibliography here. So suddenly there is a grand pantler of hell. That's the guy that handles the bread, etc. And then there's this amazing illustrator, Louis Le Breton, who he did these fantastic illustrations of most of the demons. And these become the dominant images of the demons today. You can get these, it's public domain stuff, so it's all over the place. Some rock art occurs with these guys on their cover, that sort of thing. His work is amazing. He's a great landscaper as well, but this really sells the idea of demons as fanciful, whimsical characters, which takes me to Bure. I really love Bure. My sketchbook of Bure art is over there if you want to flip through it. Bure originally, I gotta go really fast. Bure originally probably appeared as a centaur. He's associated with Capricorn, and his mythology very strongly maps onto Chiron, the mentor of Hercules. They have the same interests: herbalism, medicine, natural philosophy. They're both seen in the sign of Sagittarius or Capricorn, one of the two, and that is the name for Chiron as well. So I think they've got a strong association going back quite some time. But at some point in time, Bure was described as appearing in the sign of Sagittarius, and then described as being a Sagittarius, and then being what happens when a lion fucks a starfish. I really love Bure, probably because he looks like this, and he's a very popular image when it comes to crazy demon chaos ideas. Here he is on the Satan's shoes that Little Nas X put out. This is from How Things Work, I think. How to Summon a Demon. It's Bure. I really like Bure a lot. So later, this fellow, who you probably know, a very renowned occult scholar, consolidates a lot of stuff into his book Black Magic and Pacts, which I do not have with me, and that contains a footnote saying, also, this is the hierarchy of hell, and he lists all of Barbicure's contributions to the Dictionary Infernal, and says that they are contributed by Weyer, who we discussed briefly in the 1600s. So suddenly, through time travel, all this stuff becomes fact. And it's a very weird story, and I think it messed up a lot of very nice demons and gave them strange job titles. In the modern era, there's not a lot of new demons being invented, but it's a period where people start using Satan as a rebellious metaphor for rebellion, particularly like feminist rebellion. Lilith becomes a big thing. Satan and Lucifer become big ideas for like getting away from the crass culture of the world and like becoming more artistic and being your own person. And demons start embodying that. In particular, Bahamut is a good example of this period. Bahamut was originally mentioned in the 1300s in some heresy trials for the Knights Templar, but in the 1850s, an artist named Levy created this golem-like construct that's half man, half woman, half animal, half human, half good, half bad, half seated, half standing, and it's kind of this constructed golem-like entity of dualism, and kind of a GBLT champion as well, because he's kind of both male and female and neither at once. And he becomes the image of like rational occult. He's, I think, the main symbol of the atheistic group, the Satanic Temple, who I'll be speaking with in a few weeks. He gives people the license to create their own symbol set from the parts they find around him. Cultural detritus to build something for community. He's also tied to an idea of the goat of Mendes, which is a scandal put on the Egyptians by Christians, saying that one of the ceremonies in this town of Mendes was everybody would come and boink a goat. That kind of references that for some strange reason. I don't know. I keep jumping through these things. But that's just kind of part of his charm. I don't know what word I was looking for was going to be there. Another modern demon, Zozo. This is the demon of the Ouija board. It's a very modern demon. He comes from 2009, where someone was working with a Ouija board. And when you're on the Ouija board, your hands jitter when you're bored. And one common jitter pattern is 0Z, 0Z, 0Z. And that became the name Zozo because Abba was taken, I guess. But Zozo, in a creepypasta type story posted to True Ghost Tales, Zozo is contacted through a Ouija board and then possesses the guy's sister, did a bunch of other crazy things. It's very Amityville horror type thing. And YouTube and a movie deal helped kind of push this story to the public. And now I see in Michelle Belanger's excellent Dictionary of Demons, they mention Zozo as a possible like addition to the demonic canon. I'm sorry I have to jump through all these things. Before you add some time for one or two more questions, I'd like to close with a thought that I had while researching this panel, which is that God made man and woman, presumably in his image, but he made them in our image, the image of the divine council. Now, I've done some math. There's one Yahweh, and maybe if you add 2 or 3 other spirits, there's 4 or 5 things that could be Yahweh. There are about 10 Satans on the list. So while we are made in the image of God, we're much more made in the image of Satan. And thank you so much for being here with me tonight.